Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all the other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. And I'm delighted today to welcome special guest, Clementine Moss, who's here today to talk about inherent joy and other things too. Clementine is a rock and roll drummer, a singer and songwriter, a writer, and a spiritual counselor in the modalities of depth hypnosis and applied shamanic counselling. Her book, From Bonham to Buddha and Back, which you can see behind me if you're watching, uses her music career as a metaphor for contemplative practice. And actually, reading the book is a bit of a rock and roll experience, actually, because you're sort of vibing back and forth between, drumming, meditating and tuning in, drumming, suffering and going through life, drumming, it's the most amazing trip actually reading the book. So I highly recommend it. You can find Clem at clemthegreat.com, and that will be in show notes as well. So Clementine, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Catherine. This is going to be so much fun. I've really been looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. And I didn't just invite you because you have a wonderful name. Clementine's a fantastic name. But then when I saw, oh my God, she's a rock and roll drummer for a Led Zeppelin band.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, I loved Led Zeppelin when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I thought there's people still out there rocking that music.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing to think that it's like, what, 50, 60 years old. I know.
Don't tell me how old I am. But yeah, true.
Well, music kind of lives in eternity, so.
Of course it does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this thing of inherent joy, which actually I do think you express, in your vibe, but we were talking about that in the pre-call, and it was something that kind of came through as something that's very present for you and has been in your life. So I'm going to ask you to cast your mind back and see if you can remember the first time you really kind of noticed or felt inherent joy, that became something that was a real thing for you.
Well, I hesitate to tell the story, but it kind of is the first time I realized that everything wasn't going to be inherent joy. So I think I assumed that we were all here, kind of in a joyful way to get along and to kind of have a great time, basically. And I remember being a very small child, and I think that people around me were arguing, and we were somewhere where we were supposed to be having fun, and people were arguing. And I think it probably was my parents when I look at it, or, maybe my extended family. But I remember feeling this sense of frustration and thinking, like, but it's so nice here, like it's so happy here. Like, what's the problem? You can't even, I could see that they couldn't even see how lovely it was. And I remember this little thought going through my head that I'm sure it was a completely different experience at the time, but now say that it felt like I thought, oh, that's the game we're going to be playing here. We're going to be ignoring, we're going to get wrapped up in like this stuff that doesn't matter and miss all of the beauty around us. And I remember having that kind of understanding in an instant. So when I think about it, I think that kind of points to the fact that I was sort of born with that that innate capacity to just recognize that that this experience, at the ground level is joy. And if I were going to say my big picture idea, it's that what consciousness is, or God, or whatever that thing is that kind of brings us into manifestation. I really believe that at the base of it is this vibration of of joy, of of love. Not love the emotion, but like just that vibration of of good, you know. So that's just the way I see life. Um, so
Oh,
I guess that,
lovely. I mean,
yeah,
I can
that's
understand why in that case, in that moment as a child,
hmm
suddenly thought, well, why are people playing this sort of fake game? It sounds like
yeah, yeah,
an
yeah.
unreal game.
Like kind of like you're missing it though. You're missing it. There's so much, there's so much good stuff here.
I wonder
Yeah.
how many other very young children have had a similar experience. I wonder, people listening, I wonder um,
hmm
if, because I've got memories as a child as well. I'm looking at adults and thinking, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
What on earth
Yeah.
are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. You're
And
making things so difficult. Yeah.
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 And when you noticed that, do you feel, did that um, affect that fundamental kind of connection or perception that you had in some way? Or was it, did that remain intact? Because that's kind of the other part of the story, isn't it? That,
Yeah, that is a good question. And I think what I ended up feeling, especially as a young adult or a teenager, was that there was kind of something wrong with me that I wasn't able to, um, that I did have that kind of feeling and thought, oh, maybe I'm just maybe I'm just ignorant, or maybe I'm just not cool, or maybe I'm just not in on what everybody else knows, and um, thinking that, I moved to New York when I was 22 years old, and over the years, a lot of the people I was hanging out with ended up, kind of pursuing drug addictions, or and I remember feeling kind of bad that I just felt like I wanted to wake up with that song in my heart that I had every morning, and feeling really kind of stupid for feeling that way. And then at a certain point, I remember thinking, oh, it's my job to be Miss Mary Sunshine. It's my job to be the kind of happy idiot in the group. And I started to embrace that more and more when I became kind of older, just thinking, well, I'm not cool, but I can't help it. It's just who I am. And somebody needs to see the good in people. Somebody needs to see the happy, positive, somebody has to be positive. So it's kind of how I
okay.
saw it.
So you went from a journey of um, basic sense of inherent joy, and that's just the
hmm
reality, to,
hmm
oh, other people are playing this fake game.
hmm
What's that about? To, oh my God, there's something wrong with me because I believe in joy.
Yeah.
To, oh, maybe it's my job to help other people see joy.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
completely
Something
get
like
that. Well,
that.
I'm very glad
Yeah.
that's what popped out on the other side, because, a lot of people could have been really sort of crushed by that.
I think a lot of people are crushed by that. I do think that it is our inherent nature. I do think that within us, there is a part of us that is perfectly fine, perfectly happy, perfectly well. And for me, healing is connecting to that part of ourselves and living from that part of ourselves. And we have a million ways to to not find that place, to not want to to believe that that exists. Yeah.
A million ways to not want that or not believe it exists.
hmm
Say something
hmm
more about that.
Well, I think that, contemplative practice, I think the point of it is um, to find that place within us, that still sort of eternal place within us, that inner awareness. Sometimes I describe it like, if you're in a car accident and you're in shock, and you kind of get yourself from here to over there to call somebody, and it's like you're not quite there, right? Because you're in shock. I always say it's that part of you that's carrying you from point A to point B, that part of you that's kind of guiding you to do what you need to do, but you're not thinking of it. It's just and your mind is completely somewhere else, and yet you still have this part of yourself that gets you somewhere. Like, or you think about being really, really sick. There's a part of you that, like, within you is okay, and is kind of helping you get through it. And I feel that a lot of contemplative practice guides us to that place within us. And over time, we start learning how to let that navigate our way through the world. But it's really difficult to make the time to sit down even for 10 minutes for a lot of people. Or a lot of people say, I sit down and it's just, I can't, it's like I'm crawling out of my skin. I can't do it. I just can't meditate. Those kind of ideas. I think, and I think it's uncomfortable because as we look for that place within us, we encounter all of the resistance to going there, and that's highly uncomfortable. And we're not. Our society isn't geared towards sitting in the uncomfortable. It's geared towards escaping the uncomfortable. We have a million ways to escape. So there's something like that in there.
I understand what you mean, right? So you're talking about the million ways that we can not feel what we're feeling, the million
That's
ways
right.
we can avoid the discomfort of going in deeper.
Mhm, mhm.
That's really interesting. And did you ever encounter that? When you went, you kind of were telling the story up to
Mhm.
probably sort of mid-late 20s or something like that. Did you already have a contemplative practice at that point, or did you get involved with that then? What was the story with that?
Yeah, I started reading about meditation in college, I believe. I think the first book I ever read about contemplative practice was The Three Pillars of Zen. Um, and it was Zen, people who were in Zen practice relating their conversations with their teacher, like all of the blocks that they were having and it's like the first time that was kind of spelled out for people about what it really looks like for somebody to sit for 40 days or go through the Zen practice and all of the things that were coming up for them. And I thought that was really interesting. So I started to go to um, a monastery and do some, sit in some lectures and start to do some meditation. So that was early on in my 20s. And then a little bit later on in my 20s, somebody said, he was talking to me about meditation. And I said I was going to, practicing some Zen meditation. And they said, oh, you should go to the beginning. You should really do Vipassana. You should go to a 10-day meditation retreat. And so that's what I did. I went to a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And that really set my contemplative practice, moving forward. That's sort of the basic practice. I've done many different practices, but that is the one that is the foundation of everything I do. Yeah.
How great that you did that in your early 20s, because I think a lot of people nowadays discover or are ready to try those things in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
It's amazing now when I just went to a 10-day silent retreat, and most of the people there were young women. Yeah, there were young men and women. Really, I drove up with a woman who's 22. She drove me to the center. So yeah, I'm really amazed at young folks doing that.
I'm thrilled to hear it, because imagine what they're
Yeah.
like in their 50s and 60s.
I know.
That's
I
just
know. I
really
know.
absolutely wonderful.
It's wonderful.
I mean, I probably started my first organized spiritual practice in my mid-20s.
Hmm.
And it definitely, I'm quite a bit older than that now, and it means that
Hmm.
now when I'm encountering experiences, learning experiences and so on, it's completely different than it would have been had I not started that then. So it's been very
That's
good
right.
foundation. But of course, one can start at any point, can't we? We can start at whatever point we are. In case there's any listeners thinking, yeah, I'm 43, I can't do it.
Oh gosh, yeah. You can do anything at any point. Yeah. Time is irrelevant.
And did you take to it quite readily when you started because of that perspective on life that you had, or did you also have resistance you had to deal with?
Well, I think there's always resistance. I mean, I guess I do believe that there are some people who kind of reach what we would call, full en enlightenment or full the dropping away of the ego self. You know what I mean? That I guess I do believe. I mean, I have wonderful mentors who I feel are very far forward toward that. But I think even they encounter resistance. And I think we are human, so there's always going to be some resistance. I mean, I guess I do love to believe that there are some truly enlightened beings on the planet, but I think those are very few and far between. So, um, yeah, so I think there's always resistance, and I think when I look at my life, I was very into literature when I was growing up. I'm really a reader. I considered myself a writer from the time I was 8 years old. So I loved reading about the big picture always. So I think I was always kind of geared towards seeking in some kind of way, geared towards that. When I went to the first 10-day meditation retreat, I recognized the technique, which is of observing sensation on the body, kind of moving your mind, up and down the body, observing sensation. And I recognized it as something I had been doing since I was a little kid to get to sleep. So I really felt a connection to, I feel like I was geared towards it for whatever reason. Yeah. Um, and then in that first meditation retreat, I had that big experience of, just a few seconds of that, like that feeling of oneness, where everything kind of fell away and everything felt like it was like this infinitely opening and closing flower, everything as one thing in movement. And that was pretty disorienting in a way, kind of knocked me around for a little while. Um, and But I feel like that was just something that happened to give me a guidepost, like there's a lot more to investigate here, and set me on my path. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. It's lovely hearing that.
Hmm.
I could imagine that
Hmm.
that thing of the flower opening, that I haven't heard someone describe that experience in that way.
Hmm.
Because often when people describe these things, it sounds like they're talking about just quiet stillness, which
Hmm.
doesn't express the vibrancy of the experience. But what
Oh
you say about
gosh,
the
yeah.
flower is
It's
a
like
lot more, there's a lot more movement in it. Than,
so much alive, like so much aliveness that it was beyond explanation. It was overwhelming, of the amount of alive, aliveness. Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so some people are thinking, hold on a minute, I thought this woman was a drummer. How did the drumming come into your life?
So the drumming started in my late 20s. I'd moved to New York to write, and I was floundering a little bit, finding my voice, knowing what to write about, feeling lost. And I had musicians in my orbit, and I ended up taking a drum lesson. Um, I like to take lessons and things when I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And so I took a drum lesson, and they just caught me. It felt really natural. I loved my teacher too. Um, and so it just kind of happened really fast. And I made a decision to just follow it, just let's just see where this goes. And yeah, now I've been doing it for a long time now. Yeah.
Ah,
So,
because
yeah.
and you sing as well now, don't you?
Yeah, I'm a songwriter, and at a certain point, I was writing a bunch of lyrics, and I thought, "Oh, darn it, I have to sing them." But I do really love performing. I love singing and performing. I love being in the studio and writing songs. It's yeah, I really do feel my full creative power when I'm, writing lyrics, creating songs, working to make the music, and then performing it. I mean, it's what I really, I sat myself down a few years ago and was like, what do I really love to do? And just immediately knew that that's really what drives me. So yeah, I do that. The drumming, it's funny because over time the drumming became a kind of contemplative practice. When you're sitting on the drum seat, I'm trying to get to the same place I'm trying to get to when I'm sitting on the meditation mat. I'm looking for that still awareness within myself that is not um, thrown off by external stimulus. I'm non-reactive, and I'm if I can kind of hollow myself out and just be in that awareness, then it's like the music is playing me and I'm not, there's no tension, it's just a freedom of playing. And that's the goal, right? When I get on stage. And in that I get to connect to the audience. That it's like I always imagine like the sound waves coming from the drums are like moving through all of the people, and then all of the people, their experience is coming back to me. And so it's just a really, I mean, music is just so magical in bringing us together in that way, and drums are that way. And then a few years ago, I went to learn how to do the shamanic journey. I went to a class in the shamanic journey, and the drum came out, the hand drum, the frame drum came out, and all of these light bulbs clicked on in my head like, oh yeah, this it has been drums have been holy to me, in the way that they carried me without me, doing much. They just like kind of carried me through life in all of these different ways, and I realized they were showing me another side of themselves to use in spiritual counseling and practice.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Because there are all sorts of historical and legendary stories of drums being used for
By women. Yeah, by
women,
women.
devotional
Yeah,
practice,
that's right.
um,
That's right.
to drum the warriors into being ready to go out.
Yeah, during childbirth, that was a big
Yeah.
a big way that it was used was women would play the drum during childbirth because the repetitive sound of a drum activates the one of those brainwave states that it's the one that is it theta, the one that gets activated during meditation, right? So our brains change by listening to a repetitive sound of the drum. And um, in the spiritual counseling I do now, we use the drum in order to help people get into that kind of meditative state, that unthinking state, in order to do some of the work. Yeah.
Amazing. And
Hmm.
when people come to you for the spiritual counseling,
Hmm.
what sort of things are they saying in terms of why they've come or what they might?
Yeah. Right. Well, I mostly practice depth hypnosis, which is a counseling model created by Isa Gucciardi in Berkeley, California. And it combines Western psychology, especially transpersonal psychology, which takes spirit into account in the psychological method, and then Buddhism, kind of as a moral ethical framework, and then shamanism, traditional shamanism, shamanism devoid of cultural appropriation, more those shamanic practices that we find all in every shamanic practice around the world, right? Um, and um, and so there has been a study about depth hypnosis and its efficacy in helping PTSD, anxiety, depression, those kind of disorders. So people come to me a lot for those kind of things. I tend to get a lot of clients dealing with early trauma, like sexual trauma or things like that, kind of, and it's really for it's great for when we say, I keep doing this thing over and over in my life. I can't get out of this loop of thinking or loop of behavior, you know, um, or just, I keep having the same relationship over and over. I keep, having the same stress over and over. I can't get out of it. For me, I originally went for my own personal healing. I went because I had this negative voice inside my head that was saying, anything that happened in my life, I would turn it in on myself. And it was because of the way I looked, the way of my body, or just ultimately that I just wasn't good. I was a bad person, right? And I had that really strong and I couldn't figure out how to get rid of it. And I sat with it and I meditated and I went to therapy and I did all of these things. And when I started working with depth hypnosis, very shortly, it kind of disappeared. And that's when I thought, I want to do this work for other people. I think it could be really helpful.
Fantastic. And
Mm-hmm.
do people ever come to you and say, look, I want to do this because I'm actually really happy and I just want to feel even more great? Does anyone ever come for like that?
I think everybody has stuff that they struggle with. I mean, I think, I mean, I would have said when I went to my first depth hypnosis appointment, I went because I wanted to understand the connection between, I had just finished a contemplative Buddhist psychology program of 2 years, and I wanted to understand how shamanism fit in with Buddhism. And so somebody told me about this practice, and I thought, I'm just going to go and I'm just going to ask like these intellectual questions about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she was like, well, let me just show you how a session works. And we went in, and suddenly I was like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff I can work on here. There's a lot of stuff I could let go. And that's kind of how it happened for me. So I guess I was one of those people. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
fine. I don't need any help. And then,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose really all of us have got past wounds, haven't we? And as you were saying, all of us are okay, in the sense that,
Yeah.
in
Mm-hmm.
essence. So you're kind of illustrating both can be true, actually, for any of us.
Both are true, because we know that there's the, the ego self, the mask that has been kind of created through our lives, through our experience, through our DNA, through everything. We have this structure that's moving along through the world, um, and we know how painful it is when it breaks. That's the vulnerability when people really see kind of us clearly and how frightening that can be. And so I think we all have a sense that there's this part of ourselves we show the world, and then this secret part of ourselves. Um, and I think in that secret part is that part of ourself that is whole and and kind of perfect. Doesn't need to be improved, doesn't need anything. Um, but and so I think the marriage of the two is really great. I think it's okay to want to, you know, be healthier or, learn something new and all of that stuff. I think that's all part of the play of being in a body and being, here. But I think when things get really bad and we end up thinking that we're broken, or that we start identifying with the really terrible things that have happened to us. I think that's when we can really look and see that part of ourselves that is healed already.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that. And well, that reminds me as well of the tone in your book where you're going back and forth between different experiences. So
Mm.
it's not a linear, I was broken, and then after a long time later, I was whole.
Mhm.
It's a much more realistic picture of someone experiencing the range of human experience
Mhm.
um, on a journey, which is so
Yeah.
much more real actually than I was broken. I did a lot of work, got over myself.
Yeah.
Now I'm okay, which is just sort of,
Yeah.
I don't know, hallmark boring.
Well, sometimes I think that I've gone through periods where I think, okay, I'm doing really well, I'm meditating all the time, and then I'll fall off it, or I'll go on the road, or and a lot of the book is about those kind of dualities, like these two personalities I've had, the rock and roller who's like staying up, last man standing at the bar, right? That kind of my rock and roll personality, and then my contemplative personality. And I started writing the book just because I was seeing these, it's so funny that I have these two different, people in me. And over time I realized that, it's the same, I'm having the same experience. It just, why do I think that self like being able to understand myself only happens when I'm in a quiet place. Sometimes I get great lessons when I'm in, about myself in these other situations. And I think that especially I see it in kind of spiritual movement or spiritual opening as we go through life. We can think that we've kind of backtracked, at some point, like, wow, I was feeling really open and aware, and now I'm like really, obsessed with being judgmental about these situations, or, like, where did all of that spirituality go? I guess I'm back to square one. I think I think that's a part of it. We're still moving forward. It's just a part of it is these things kind of opening up, more and more. Yeah,
But we've got ideas about what being spiritual is supposed to look like.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
There was a very
I
funny
know.
JP Sears video. Do you know JP Sears, comedian?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
He did a very, very funny video about how to look really, really spiritual. It's what to wear and the things to say and how to respond to people. And he emphasized this is not about how to be spiritual. This is how to look really
Yeah.
spiritual. It was absolutely hilarious. And I think anyone watching it would be sort of wincing, realizing, oh my God, I've done that to look spiritual.
I know. I remember when I am a minister, and I remember when I was ordained as a minister with the school that I was in, and thinking like, oh gosh, am I going to be able to be a minister? And like, I don't drink anymore, but at the time I had, when I would play a show, have a whiskey or something. Can I drink whiskey and be a minister? And then I thought, what a silly conversation you're having. Like, be you. You became a minister because you really want to be of service to other people. And what does it matter? If if what does your life matter if you're showing up fully for people? Yeah, so those conversations are kind of funny with yourself, I think. Um,
Well, I love how you're embodying and kind of representing that
mm,
sort of, right, there's the inherent joy, there's the
mhm,
reality of being human,
mhm.
and there's that beautiful place we go back to if we're meditating or if we're drumming, or presumably if
Yeah,
we're cleaning the house or whatever. And people talk about getting into the zone, don't they? There's that sort of
yeah,
place.
yeah. That
And that
place.
it's I find that a very expansive perspective that you're talking
Yeah.
about, and thank you for representing that for the rest of us, because certainly for myself and maybe some of the other listeners, we can forget that, and we can think that one thing is more spiritual than another, or one context is the place where we can touch
Mhm.
God, source, spirit, truth,
Yeah.
and another place isn't.
Yeah, the idea that God is indeed absolutely everything, um, and there's nothing outside of God, I think is really helpful. I have a wonderful spiritual teacher that I follow who says, the crossing guard could be the most spiritual person you've ever met. They're being in complete service, um, and they might never sit in meditation, but they might actually be so pure of heart that, um, that you know, you would want to be there, right? So I think that um, yeah, I think our ability to be, well, one thing I think about meditation, we always, especially in, American culture, meditation is a way for us to be more productive, right? It's like, it's a way of improving ourselves and knowing ourselves and being more productive. Um, and I think we forget that I think the goal of all spiritual practice is to come to a place of compassion for the other, to see the other as we see ourselves. Because once you spend enough time opening up to those places within you that have all of that resistance to really seeing these the uncomfortable stuff within us, we start to become very compassionate to ourselves. When I recognized that I had this voice in my head that was attacking me all the time, and I only saw that during contemplative practice, like, oh my gosh, my voice, that's what I'm listening to. I became very compassionate to myself. God, poor Clem walking around like with this constant barrage of judgment. um, we become more compassionate to ourselves. We learn how to accept the idea that maybe we are deeply loved, or in that field of love. We're we're able to be loved like that. We're worthy of being loved like that. That's a kind of compassion for ourselves. And once that breaks open within us, we can't help but see the other, that way. I remember sitting in a car after I had kind of this big realization about self-compassion, and looking at people walking down the street going to work, and just seeing, like, thinking, if I'm suffering, how much everyone else might be suffering, and that cracking open to see the other as yourself. I mean, I think that's, what they call Christ consciousness, or, that, and I think that's the goal here. I don't think it's self-improvement. I think it's so that we truly can be of service in the world to ourselves and to the other. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I love that. What a great place to come to in the conversation so far. So before we wind up for today, I'm just going to ask you a couple more things. There's a whole bunch of interesting people tune into this podcast and listen to it. And a lot of those people are actively, whether they see themselves as leaders or helpers or guides, but they're definitely doing their best to be part of the solution in this interesting world we are in. Some of those are going to be listening to this, listening to us talking right now. Is there any kind of message or anything you'd really like to say to those people?
Oh, just so much gratitude. I look at the activists, I look at the people who are doing real, like, hands-on work in the world, and I'm just so grateful for those people. And I think to be of service in the world in a really powerful way is to understand that we're that it's to take care of the self, first, I think makes us more impactful. And I worry about people who burn out, who extend themselves so much, and practices to be able to bring yourself into wholeness so that you can be fully of service. I think it's really powerful. My teacher, Isa, at the school is called the Foundation of the Sacred Stream in Berkeley, has a wonderful 4-week class that is called Path of Service. And it's for people who are in the service, who are in the medical fields, or healing arts, or even just, mothers, or, caretakers, about how we're called to service and how to remain whole in order to fully be of service, because it's a real problem with people who are facing burnout. It's so overwhelming, all of the issues in the world. And so to be able to really do some practices to take care of the self in those things, I think is really important. We don't need to expend every last bit of ourselves in order to be truly of service. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. So, Clementine, we've talked about a lot today, and I could happily talk to you for hours on end.
I feel that way too, Catherine. I feel that way too.
And I am re-dipping back into your book because it was a real, rock and roll, exciting experience reading it. Has there been for you in this conversation today a favorite part?
Oh gosh, the whole thing. I mean, just bringing up these ideas about, about joy. I mean, we don't talk about joy in the world, and actually, just when we look at the world, there's so much pain and suffering. It feels like I almost feel like I shouldn't talk about joy in some way, or I shouldn't talk about, you know, any lightness. And I think it's vitally important for us to remember that. I've thought for many years, like, what am I doing with my life? I'm just a musician, right? And I should be out, being an activist, being, working hands-on, which is one reason I became a spiritual counselor, to have something that I could do to actively help people one-on-one. But a lot of the time, I was feeling bad that I had so much joy in what I did, and yet it felt like I wasn't helping the world in some way. Um, but I do think that it's really important for us to remember that art is really important because it highlights the best of humanity. It's what we're all fighting for. And you see how, authoritarians go after art. They go after the beautiful. They go after nature. They go after the things that really sustain us and give us joy, because it's a way of cutting off, our innate humanity, for ourselves and for the other. And that expression of love that art creates, I think is vitally important to the world.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Well, thank
Mhm.
you so much. It's been really great having you on today, Clementine. And I'm just going to remind everyone where to find you, which is clemthegreat.com. So everyone do go and check out Clem's website. And I will also put a link in the show notes for Clem's book let me see if I can remember the title right, from Bonham to Buddha and back. Have I got that right?
That's right. That's
Excellent.
right. That's
So,
right.
I was memorizing that earlier today. One thing when the book's in front of you and you can actually read it. Everybody, please also check out truthandtranscendence.com. And if you are currently looking for a coach to help you get more connected with your calling and bring more life to it, check out something in the show notes where you've got a chance to connect with me about that, if you feel like my particular vibe may be a good fit for you. So thank you again very, very much, Clementine, and have a
Thank you
fantastic
so much.
day.
Thank you. You too, Catherine. Thank you.